let's keep it going, ladies and gentlemen, because we're not just going to stop at what happened to Charlie Kirk. We have to talk about the philosophy, the religion, the idolatry that even made this possible. We have to talk about the gospel of guns, the gospel that one too many Christians have replaced the real gospel of Christ with, the gospel to the right to bear arms. You hear people say all the time, I have a God-given right to bear arms. Really? Do you? God-given, huh? Well, let's see. Where did he give it to you? Now, God could have spoken to you directly to tell you that he gave you a right to have a weapon, okay? I don't know who God has spoken to. So we're going to set that aside as a remote possibility that God spoke to you directly and told you to go get a gun. But for most people, when they say that, they're not talking about direct communication from God. Well, where did God communicate to you that you have a right to bear arms? Under a rock? In a tree? Or is that somewhere in your Bible? Because I have read from Genesis to Revelation and studied, there's no mention of Glocks, AR-15s, stand your ground laws in the Beatitudes. There's no blessed are the gun owners in Matthew chapter 5, or some type of verse related to that in Proverbs. So you believe in the right to bear arms. Okay, that's fine. That's American law. But you need to stop short of saying that that law came from God. The right to bear arms did not come from God. It did not come down from Mount Sinai with the other 10 commandments that Moses got. Because if it is a God-given right, how come it wasn't included in the original Constitution? Have you ever thought about that? And can you answer that for us? You see, the right to bear arms had to be added. That's why it's called the Second Amendment. Amendment means something was changed. It was not in the original document. It was added later. And if it was added, guess what? It can be taken away. That's what an amendment is. They can be added and they can be rescinded. So please don't preach to me about law and order. If the only law you care about is the one that benefits you, because I listen to how you all talk. And if the government ever did vote, if this country ever got enough liberal votes to legally and democratically rescind the Second Amendment, I listen to how you all talk. All of you are already saying, out of your irrational fear of the Democrats coming for your guns, they're going to have to pry it out of my cold, dead hands. You see, I told you, you never cared about law and order. You only use law and order when you want to police black people. You only say law and order when you want to get rid of immigrants out of the country. But if we change the law, we rescind the Second Amendment, which there's a legal way to do that, and you no longer have a right to bear arms, you would keep your guns to the death. That's why I don't respect law and order, because I know y'all don't mean it, because I'm listening to how you talk. No, you wouldn't turn your guns in. That's not law and order. That's lawlessness. Dressed up in a patriot flag, or drag if you don't mind. That is the delusion of American exceptionalism masquerading around as faithfulness to God, talking about some God-given right. But this gets worse when it seeps into the body of believers. When I hear Christians start saying things like, I need my guns to defend my family against the government. Oh, really? This the same government you claim to respect? I mean, you always telling us to respect the government. This the same government you always telling us to pray for and to obey, and that immigrants have to go home because of the laws? And now you're preparing to kill that government if they knock on your door. Okay, I got it. Makes perfect sense. Let's be real, people. If the United States government wanted to take you out today, do you not know they could? Guns or no guns? Doesn't matter how many rifles you got out in the shed. They've got drones. They've got surveillance. They've got chemical weapons. They've got psychological ops. They've got bioweapons. They've got things that you and I have never even heard of. Your government can take you out right now anytime they want, and no number of guns, handguns, rifles, shotguns can stop them. So all of this, I need an AR to protect my family talk is not logical. It's not faith, and it's not even survival. All it is fear. You all are scared. You're scared of being replaced. You're scared of dying. You're scared of losing control. It's delusional. And when that delusion infects your theology, Now you have stopped being a follower of Jesus of Nazareth. You have now become a disciple of American ideology. And let me say it plainly to make sure you get it on a 7th grade level. Jesus never promised you the right to bear arms. You want to talk about the gospel? Let's talk about the real gospel. The gospel is not about defending yourself with deadly force. The gospel is not about personal liberty. The gospel is not about preserving your Western comforts, your Western way of life, or your whitewashed constitution. The gospel I read about in the Gospels is about dying to self, about laying down your rights, about picking up your cross, and about following Jesus into a life of self-sacrifice, humility, and service. But you see, a lot of y'all don't want that gospel. You want a gospel of comfort, a gospel of control, a gospel of Charlton Heston Christianity, pried from my cold, dead hands. And that's exactly what happened with Charlie Kirk, figuratively speaking. He died with that spirit. And I'm not celebrating it. I don't have to get on here and tell you that what happened to him was not right. If you've listened to this podcast, you know that I stand behind the gospel. I don't stand behind violence. I'm lamenting what happened to him. I'm lamenting what we've become. And I'm lamenting the fact that he died in an America that he was okay having. I'm not okay with that America. It's not worth the cost. But the truth is, we don't live in the world that some of you are trying to resurrect, recreate, and take us back to. MAGA notwithstanding. Make America great again notwithstanding. We don't live in that world anymore. I mean, you keep talking to us about 50 years ago, we didn't need to lock our doors, and my granddaddy kept his shotgun in his truck and nobody touched it. Well, guess what? We don't live in your granddaddy's world anymore. We don't live in that world. We live in 2025. We live in the real world. So unless you can adapt to the reality of now, you're going to die clinging to a fantasy that no longer exists. Even Charles Darwin had that part right. If you don't adapt, you get left behind. If your worldview can't evolve in the face of carnage, if your worldview cannot evolve in the face of 20 children getting their heads blown off in school, then that, my friends, is not strength. It's not principle. It's not logical. That is weakness. And it will be your undoing because you are emotionally immature to the point that you cannot admit that you are too far gone, too far in, and that you've made a mistake and that you need to back up. Now, you think you're being principled, but you're really being inflexible. You think you're being logical, but you're really being heartless. You think that you're being pro-life, but you're really being pro-gun. Here's what I've noticed, that some of you have gotten so deep in this thing that you cannot climb out. You'd rather double down than admit the obvious, even in the face of Charlie Kirk's death and the violent images that we have seen online in the last 24 hours. Some of you are still typing away. He wouldn't have changed his mind. Well, we don't know. We can't ask him. So maybe he would. And don't you be so arrogant. Don't you be so emotionally immature that you think you already know how someone would feel after their own murder. You don't know that. And you're only saying that because you can't admit that you might have made a mistake, that you might have been duped and become delusional. Because maybe, just maybe, when you are the one bleeding out, when it's your family and your children that are crying because they are in attendance as you get murdered in real time, online, in public, not just somebody else, maybe when the gun feels a little heavier, maybe those quotes don't roll off of your tongue so easily. So some of you say you would rather die than give up your guns. You would rather your wife or your daughter be shot in the face so that you can stand on principle. That is not noble. That is not courage. That is sick. That's savage. That is cowardice dressed up as a so-called conviction. This is what happens when ideology replaces empathy. And I don't even have time to tell you what Charlie Kirk said about empathy. Go Google it. But that's exactly what happened this week. A man died who thought it was prudent and rational that other people die, and now his death is forcing all of you to reckon with whether you actually believe what you say. But I know what I believe, and I believed it before the events of yesterday. I've always said it's not worth it. When the 20 kids got their heads blown off in Sandy Hook, I said it was not worth it. When the concert goers were gunned down in Las Vegas, I said it wasn't worth it. When that white supremacist gunned down black shoppers in Buffalo, it wasn't worth it. Whether it's students in Michigan State, when it's black people, when it's white people, when it's trans people, when it's police officers, when it's politicians, my slogan is the same. It is not worth it. And I am saying it again today. But some of you don't want to listen until it's your guy that gets taken out, until it's your heroes whose blood is being spilled. Well, here it is. The blood has spilled. Now what? Will you change? Will you pause? Will you reflect? Or will you just double down in ignorance and reckless behavior and rhetoric? And for all of you talking about gun rights, some of you won't let that go. Let me hit you with this. Who told you God gave you the right to own a gun? Because the God that I serve said, blessed are the peacemakers. He says, if someone strikes you on the cheek, turn the other. He says, those who live by the sword die by the sword. Where's your verse? Where's your gospel? Where's your humility? What, do you think that countries that ban firearms are ungodly? You think Christians in other nations can't follow Jesus because they don't have a Glock? You think the early church couldn't preach the gospel because Rome didn't allow them open carry laws? You have confused the Constitution with the cross. You have confused the NRA with the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. You have made your guns your golden calf, and you're offering your children on those altars. And if you still think after all this that you're pro-life while refusing to lift a finger to restrict the tools that are literally blowing people's heads off, then I don't know what pro-life means to you. But I do know it doesn't mean what Jesus said it meant. And if you won't give up your AR-15 to save a classroom of kids, you are not pro-life. You are just pro-you and your guns. We don't need to wait for another tragedy to finally wake up. We don't need to wait for another hero to die. We don't need to wait for another school to be shot up. We don't need to wait for another church to be attacked. We don't need to wait for another grocery store to be turned into a war zone. We don't have to become victims to care about victims. We can choose empathy. We can choose wisdom. We can choose to believe that freedom doesn't have to mean more funerals. And maybe, just maybe, the gospel, the real gospel, is asking us to lay something down.